Hey, it's Joe Tamargo from WetHeadPumpRepair.com. Alright, here's an up-close look of the Hydramax armature, Hydramax pump that came out of a spa, okay, Dimension 1 spa. Okay, here's an up-close look. We're removing the bearing here. Okay, you can see the bearing. We're using a nice small puller that's tightened up here, okay? And what we did in the faraway shot, we showed you want to put the 3 jaws behind the bearing just like that. And then you want to put your center in there. Like I've mentioned before, usually you would put a socket on here to protect the threads on a larger size puller, but this is a smaller puller we're using that fits in there nicely, and the bearing is not that rusted on there, so we can use a smaller puller. And we also need to get the puller behind that fan there, okay? Because it's a tight fit there, okay? So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna turn our handle, and we're gonna remove this bearing. You can see it coming off there, okay, just like that. And then we're going to remove this front bearing on the Hydramax. All parts are available at WetHeadPumpRepair.com. We're using kit 002. Okay, there you go. There is the bearing removed. Let me just get it out of my puller here. Okay, there is the bearing removed right there. And inside of our kit 001-202. Okay, that's the kit. You get the front and the rear motor bearing. Okay, so we're going to be taking out our little piece of packing in there, and then we're going to be taking out a bearing. So here's our one bearing, and then we got our second bearing in here, and then we got some little seal lube, and then we got the seal as well. Alright, now that we got our parts out, we're going to be changing bearings. So alright, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the rear bearing. I'm just going to flip this armature over. Okay, I'm going to loosen up my vise. I'm going to flip the armature over just like this. Alright. Here we go. Now I'll show you again with the bearing puller. Okay, it's nice and tight in my armature. Okay, we got the 2 bearings we're going to be using in a second. Right. So nice and tight in the vise. I'm going to loosen my puller up again so I can get my 3 jaws behind that bearing. Okay, you want to make sure you get the jaws, all 3 jaws behind the bearing if you're using a 3-jaw puller. If you're using a 2-jaw puller, you know, you only have to get 2 jaws. Now see there, I have to bring my shaft, my center shaft in because, you know, this shaft is a little bit smaller on the side. Now be careful, you have threads in here. Guys showed you before we had to remove that center screw, so be careful, don't go crazy tightening this puller, you know what I mean, or if too fast, make sure it's straight also. You don't want to do it on an angle, because if you do it on an angle, it could ruin those threads. Alright, so here we go. I'm just going to tighten my puller up a little bit to fit around this. You have to adjust it. This is a posi lock puller, so it has an outside ring where you can tighten it on the side, so you might have to do that, or if you just have a free puller, you won't have to do that. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to tighten my center screw. I'm going to try to keep my puller straight as well. You don't want to have your pull crooked. And like I said, you don't want to just jam it in there and just start getting crazy with it. You kind of want to just do it nice and slow and even. Alright, so there you go. The bearing puller is lined up. Alright, so we're going to go ahead now and remove these bearings. Okay, just by turning the center screw like this. Okay, now this bearing is a little stuck here. So we're going to have to back this puller off and use a bigger puller, okay? Now see what happened there? What had happened there is the bearing puller is a little bit small. See, and what's happening is that this tip is going to the end shaft. So now what I'm going to have to do, because I probably smushed the threads a little in there, is I'm probably going to have to now use like a little bit of a tap to clean those threads up later on. And I'll show you how to do that, because this happens often to other people. And yeah, it didn't really mess up the threads, it just kind of made a little indent there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a bigger puller, okay, on the back. Now I'm kind of glad that happened on video, because you watch a lot of those home improvement shows, and they're like, oh, everything just works perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this bigger puller. So this is a nice bigger puller. And that's got a bigger tip on there, and this will get the job done more effectively. Alright, so I'm going to use my bigger puller now. Now you think, wow, the shafts are smaller, but why do I need a bigger puller? Because it's got a bigger tip, and it will hook on there better, you know. And sometimes the smaller puller was better for the front because it had that concave section with the back. So you want to just be careful. You know, if I would have went any further, I could have really damaged the internal threads inside there. But because I felt when I started to turn it, you know, when I was starting to turn it, I felt that it wasn't going. It was just going to start damaging something. So now what I'm going to do is put a bigger tip in here like this, and then I'm going to tighten this up like that. Alright, and then I'm just going to get a pair of channel locks, and I'm going to remove this bearing, okay? So here we go, I'm just going to get a pair of channel locks in a second. Well, not channel locks, you should really use a wrench. You should really use a wrench to remove the bearing. Sometimes you can use your puller and just turn it like this. So, okay, I got a wrench right on my table here. All right, I'm just going to remove this bearing. Okay, so here we go. Let me grab that wrench over there. All right, here's a wrench. Let me stretch for it. There we go. All right, so I got the wrench now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start turning the wrench to loosen this bearing. All right, so there we go. I got it nice and tight. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this wrench and loosen the bearing, and when we come back, we're going to show you how to install the bearings. This is Joe Tamargo from WetHeadPumpRepair.com. Remember, the 2 bearings, the PS2 one, and everything comes in this kit. Nice kit. It's a great deal, and you can rebuild your pump. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this bearing now. Let's stop talking. You've heard me talk for 5 minutes. You see me remove the front bearing. I've got the larger puller. I've showed you about the smaller puller, and now I'm going to tighten my wrench, remove my bearing, and get to work. All right, take it easy. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.